On your screen, you will see Helen and Jack. Jack and Helen, it's really good to see you both tonight. Thank you for joining us. Hope you're both well.
Indeed.
We're recording this section as we reflect together with Helen and Jack about safeguarding in the life of the church. So let me ask you a question first of all. What drew you into your safeguarding role? Why is safeguarding such a part of your own personal vocation and service to God?
I previously had a long career within the NHS, most of which I spent working as a health visitor with local families. Many of those families lived in poverty and where social problems, including domestic abuse and child protection issues, were common. This led me more latterly towards more specific and statutory roles within safeguarding in health. So I started as a safeguarding supervisor, then as a named nurse for child protection, and I ended my career as acting designated nurse for safeguarding. Up until my retirement from the NHS in 2017, I'd always worshipped within the Anglican Church, but having moved around that time, I'd failed to find a worshipping community where I felt I belonged. Then, about 12 months later, my daughter asked me to go to church parade locally, as my grandson had just joined Boys Brigade and my granddaughter Rainbows. This was a local Methodist church, and we both immediately felt a connection, a love and a sense of belonging, and I knew I'd discovered my new spiritual home. It wasn't long until we became members, and I began to explore ways in which I could support the church. So I attended a church council meeting as an observer and was intrigued by this thing referred to as the connection. As soon as I got home, I Googled it and found the Methodist Church website. And as I meandered my way through, I found a job section in which was advertised the role of District Safeguarding Officer for the Manchester and Stockport Methodist District. I applied, and the rest is history. So for me, this was God putting me where I needed to be when I needed to be there, fulfilling the promise in Jeremiah 29, verse 11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. And I really believe that his plan for me has always been ministry through safeguarding.
Thanks, Helen. Thank you. I smiled when you talked about the intriguing thing referred to as the connection. Because you've moved from being a district employee to a connectional employee.
Part of it now.
Even more so, you work for this intriguing thing called the connection. Thanks for that, Helen. And we give thanks to God for the way God's drawn you into this role and all the experience that you bring to it. Jack, how about yourself?
For me, safeguarding's always been part of my life. Originally, I trained as a primary school teacher and I taught across Merseyside. And then in 2019, I was looking for something a bit different. So I joined the Methodist Church as a children and secondary schools worker on the Wirral, for the Wirral circuit. 2 years later, when our circuit safeguarding officer retired, I applied for the role alongside my children's work as a circuit safeguarding officer. And that's when I discovered that safeguarding really was one of my real passions. I was fortunate enough to have a very supportive line manager, both in the children's work department and in the safeguarding department, who encouraged me to take on more safeguarding responsibilities across multiple circuits. Eventually, I became the CSO for 3 circuits, and with the backing of what was the Liverpool District and the Wirral Circuit, I began a master's in safeguarding at Birmingham City University, which I'm still on to this day. And that experience has really been invaluable, not just for my church work, but also my collaboration with multi-agency partners. Last year, the district safeguarding role became available, and I'd already worked with colleagues like Helen through things like the regional safeguarding training group, and had met her a couple of times and worked with her on the connectional safeguarding conferences. So I applied and was delighted to be appointed. Today, I feel really privileged to be working alongside Helen, alongside Julie and Linda, and so many dedicated church and circuit safeguarding officers across the whole district and mission areas, ministers and church members. Faith has always been central to my life. I grew up worshipping at a Church of England parish. I was a Boys Brigade member, where I received my first Bible, one which I still have to this day. And then just over 20 years ago, I auditioned and was accepted into Liverpool Cathedral Choir. And it's been a real joy to remain involved there and now support choristers in the same way I was supported. But for me, safeguarding is a calling. And the words from Proverbs, which inspired the charity 31:8, really speak out to me and sum it up perfectly. Speak out for those who cannot speak, for all the rights of all the destitute. Speak out, judge righteously, defend the rights of the poor and the needy. That's something I believe we're all here to do. Help our churches become safer spaces for everyone.
Thank you very much, Jack. And I've heard you mention 31:8 there, the charity, and we're going to come on to that now because we have the encouragement for churches to have a safeguarding Sunday. So Helen first, what might be the value of a safeguarding Sunday in a church or a circuit? Why have a safeguarding Sunday, Helen?
Well, as you just said, Phil, Jack mentioned 31:8, and this is the independent Christian safeguarding charity that leads the national awareness raising campaign that is Safeguarding Sunday. Now in its 7th year, this campaign invites churches of every size, shape and tradition to stop, reflect, and crucially to take action to make our communities safer for all. And we live in a time when trust in the church has been shaped by revelations of abuse, neglect, and silence. This year's theme, Action Speaks Louder, calls us all to become part of a new story, a better story, one of repentance, restoration, and real change. It's encouraging that the church, it is encouraging the church to move beyond just talking about safeguarding into taking action towards positive change and recognizing what we've got right, learning from where we've fallen short, and being honest about what needs to change. It never hurts to remind ourselves that safeguarding is fundamental to the mission of the Methodist Church and is a demonstration of its response and witness to the love of God in Jesus Christ. And having a day in the year to highlight this, it's a great start. However, safeguarding must go above and beyond just one day. It should run through everything we say and everything we do as a church and as individuals. So Safeguarding Sunday is an opportunity for churches to celebrate all those unsung heroes behind the scenes, keeping people safe, for reflection on how our church communities can grow in care, accountability, and transparency, and is an opportunity to pray for healing, justice, and wisdom, and to commit to actively building a culture where safeguarding is second nature.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you. Jack, tell us a little bit more about resources that are available for Safeguarding Sunday.
So we've obviously already mentioned the fantastic resources from 31:8, which are available on their website, and we'll share that with you. But there's also some resources from within the district called May I. And what I love about both sets of resources is their flexibility. They're perfect for Safeguarding Sunday, but they can be used at any time in the year. For example, today we're having our safeguarding service a month early. And I know of one church in the district that holds their safeguarding service in March because that's the date that works best for them. And I think that's really important, is make these resources work for you. So weaving them in, for example, into the church's year as a whole, using one of the suggested hymns and explaining why you chose it, including one of the prayers alongside others in a normal service. It's about embedding safeguarding into the life of the church, not just as a one-off event, but as part of our ongoing worship and culture.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you for reminding us about that flexibility. In one sense, we can choose whichever Sunday to have a particular focus, but to keep safeguarding and some of these resources as tools we can use throughout the year. So as we think about May I, this particular resource that's been grown up a little bit more locally, and we wanted to focus on that a little bit this evening in the context of safeguarding and of the issue of touch or handshakes or hugs, etc., in church. One scripture also talks about holy kissing. Well, I've never seen that demonstrated, but it is an issue for us to consider carefully. Can you tell us why this is such an important aspect of safeguarding? May I, Helen?
It's certainly come through our advanced module training that one of the unexpected benefits of COVID and the gradual return to face-to-face worship was that our churches re-examined their approach towards the peace. Within worship, the peace is a demonstrative act of community. Everyone's included. And this is how we say to one another, we're here together in the presence of God, and I acknowledge before God that you count too. However, for many people, the very demonstrative act that this had become over years of vigorous handshaking, hugging, and other forms of greeting, often accompanied by significant movement around the church, was difficult to cope with and difficult to challenge. And this wasn't only for those who may have experienced inappropriate or unwanted touch in the past. Many people just felt it was an invasion of their personal space, and it often left people feeling really quite uncomfortable. However, after we gradually began to come back together, we as churches had to consider other non-tactile ways of sharing the peace. And this included those socially distanced waves, use of sign language, elbow bumps. And I think it's fair to say many of our churches have never returned to the overly enthusiastic practice known in previous safeguarding training as Olympic peace-giving. Anecdotally, this now seems to have led to an empowering of people who may once have felt unable to challenge unwanted or initiated touch in other aspects of church life to find their voice and clearly express their feelings. And this has been helped enormously by the development of the May I resources, which can be found in the safeguarding section of both the Connectional and the NWED websites, and which have been produced by someone with lived experience of the lifelong trauma and the impacts that this can cause. And so the work of empowering people to set boundaries and embrace consent has begun and continues.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you, Jack. What would you add to that about these May I resources?
I find myself very fortunate to be able to work with the team who put these together and those who put it together. And one thing that's really stood out for me is a story that they shared with me after the materials have been out for a while, so it's been able to disseminate. Someone from outside the Methodist Church just said, "May I shake your hand?" And for them, that simple act of asking permission just brought so much joy. It showed that the message about consent and respect was reaching beyond their own contexts. For me personally, a moment of joy came when I visited a church and saw the May I safeguarding posters displayed, but not just for visitors. They were also there for volunteers and even external hires to the church. It wasn't a case of a poster for poster's sake. You could tell the church had truly embraced the principles behind. People were thinking differently about things like touch and permission, and that shift in culture is exactly what these resources and Safeguarding Sunday as a whole is designed to achieve.
Thank you, Jack. And before the service that we're part of this evening finishes, you'll post some links to those resources in the chat, won't you? So that those who are able to might want to click on those links tonight. And then you've got, there you go. Then you've got immediate access to where those resources are. Just a personal word from both of you, because I'm very, very conscious that over the summer your roles changed from being district safeguarding officers to this new role of regional officer for safeguarding. And we might think, well, that's just a change of name, isn't it? Maybe it is, but you're not district employees. You now work for this intriguing organisation called the Connection, Helen. So just, I suppose it's for us to know and to be able to pray for the four of you. Reflect upon that role change for any of us who are wondering, what's the difference between a district safeguarding officer and now a regional officer for safeguarding? Helen, why don't you go first?
Well, I'd like to suggest that there will be no other difference other than, as you said, Phil, the change in title and a change in employer. So as you said, we've gone from being employed directly by the districts we serve to being employed by the Connectional Council, and thus we've become part of the Connectional team. But I have to say that my heart remains with all those wonderful people that I've had the privilege of working with over the last 7+ years in the churches and circuits of what is now the Greater Manchester Plus mission area. And increasingly now, those beyond just our own mission area into all the other mission areas as well.
Thank you. Thank you. It was always envisaged, I think, that though we begin our life in 4 distinct mission areas, that actually there's a lot of blurring of those boundaries. And I know that you support one another in the way that you work as a team, and that's good. Jack, tell us from your perspective about that difference.
I think for me, the move across the connection will really help with a greater consistency and safeguarding practice, hopefully. It will also give us the opportunity to share our subject specialisms. So I know that, for example, in NWED, the 4 of us all come from different backgrounds. Helen's, as she said, is in health. Mine was in teaching and now in higher education. Linda's is in secondary education, and Julie's was in the probation. So imagine that times across the Northwest region and then across the whole connection. So it'll give us a chance to share our subject specialisms and gain specialisms from other people, which will really strengthen, I think, our development and learning as a team. Like Helen said, in many ways, things will not change that much, apart from our email addresses and our phone numbers. But we have made sure that those are widely advertised as possible in emails, in posters, and in other things, just to make sure that people can still reach us as easily as they could before.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So you will get the opportunity now to meet as a connectional team of regional officers for safeguarding. Roughly how often do you meet in that way?
As a region, so a Northwest region, which goes basically from Cumbria all the way down to the West Midlands, we meet once every 2 weeks over online, which is great. But as a whole connectional team, I think we're hoping to meet 2 or 3 times a year. Yeah. And then one big time when we meet is obviously the Connectional Safeguarding Conference, which is a great time to talk through safeguarding practice, but also to see what other people can do. Last year we had a sort of open mic night, and we did things all the way from magicians to Linda writing a poem about safeguarding on the night and performing it. I thought that was incredible.
We've missed seeing Linda tonight then, or we to put her on the spot for her poetry.
And if we could just ask Phil that everybody here prays for Linda. Linda is currently not in work, having had knee replacement surgery, and I think it's caught her out quite how painful it would be and how long a process the healing may well be. So if we could just ask that people keep Linda in their thoughts and prayers, we'd be really grateful.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Helen. Thank you for what you've both shared. And in a few moments, you're going to be leading us in prayer for other people, and we'll keep Linda in our prayers. But we wanted you to know, Helen and Jack, that you are, all 4 of you, in our prayers an awful lot of the time. When we need you, we know how you respond wonderfully, and you're there for us, and you bring such a lot of care and expertise and wisdom. And so we really appreciate you, and thank you for the time that you've given to us tonight. We hope you know that you're in our prayers. Just before you lead us in prayer, the 2 readings that we had from the Bible, from Ezekiel and from Luke, the May I resource has a little bit of a sermon note for each. And I thought if we ended with this and then ask Helen and Jack to lead us in prayer. On the Ezekiel passage, the notes encourage us to think in this way. Ezekiel 34 is a chapter about the responsibility of leaders to care for their people as shepherds care for their flock. There's a responsibility particularly to care for those who are pushed outside of the flock due to their particular needs. The leaders of the time are being criticised for seeking their own comfort and wealth rather than the well-being of their flock. God will send the ultimate shepherd who understands about leadership in terms of compassion and inclusion. It is a challenge to each of us to seek out those who feel outcast in our faith communities and to examine any practices which reinforce this exclusion. The May I campaign was launched to try to open the conversation about those who feel unsafe in church because of issues around touch. Unfortunately, very public scandals involving leadership, shepherds, have meant that churches are not perceived as safe places. Mm-hmm. It has also come to light that many people avoid church because they're uncomfortable with some of the practices, for example, hugging, that we may see as offering a warm welcome, but which can be experienced as invasive or threatening or simply cause discomfort. So, how can we make our faith spaces safer places? And a short reflection on the Luke passage, the woman touching Jesus's garment. Even though there was a crowd pressing around Jesus, he felt the power draining from him when the woman who was seeking healing touched the hem of his garment. Touch can feel different in different circumstances. It can be comfortable or uncomfortable. Touch has power, and it can be uncomfortable if it is being used to control or manipulate. Being on the receiving end of touch can sometimes be difficult to know what the intention behind the touch is. In a church setting, it will be a positive step if we ask permission before touching anyone. We chose tonight just 2 of the passages, but there are several other passages which the May I resource encourages us to consider. And you can imagine how that material could lead to some interesting and helpful conversations in small groups, in pastoral gatherings, in safeguarding meetings. So the resource is there not just for a safeguarding Sunday service, but in other ways too.